I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest. No one in my town ever screamed after dark, because the thing in the woods didn't like noise. And the last person who forgot that rule was never found again. You might think I'm exaggerating. You might think this is just some small-town superstition or another one of those creepy local legends every rural place claims to have. But the night I found out why everyone stayed silent, why no one opened their doors after midnight, why not even dogs barked after dark, everything I thought I knew about this town shattered. It started the moment I heard a knock. A slow, deliberate knock. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. And the worst part? It came from my back door, the one no one ever uses. I remember freezing, my phone slipping slightly from my hand as the sound echoed through the small kitchen. I wasn't expecting anyone. My nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. And no one, absolutely no one, visits unannounced in a town like ours. Especially not at 12:43 a.m. For a few seconds I genuinely thought I was imagining it. Sleep deprivation. Stress. Maybe the old wooden frame contracting in the cold night air. But then I heard it again. 3 taps. Silence. 3 taps. Silence. Like someone was waiting for me to answer. I whispered to myself, no, please don't be real. Because every kid who grew up here knew the rule. If something knocks after midnight, you don't respond. You don't speak. You don't move. You pretend you don't exist. But that night, it didn't matter what I knew. The knocking was getting louder, sharper, more impatient. And then it spoke. Not loudly. Not clearly. It sounded like someone learning how to use their vocal cords for the first time, like it was copying a sound it heard humans make. In a broken, distorted whisper, it said my name. My name. How did it know? Who told it? Why was it at my door? I covered my mouth, terrified that even breathing too loudly would answer its call. My heart hammered so hard I could feel my pulse behind my eyes. Something about that voice, about how wrong it sounded, made my entire body lock up. And then it tried the handle. Not violently. Not like a burglar or desperate stranger. But gently. Testing. Exploring. Twisting the metal as if memorizing the shape of my lock. And I realized something horrifying. It wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to learn how. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a person. Not even close. Because when the handle stopped moving, when the silence settled for a moment, I heard something scrape slowly across the door. Like claws. Long ones. Dragging down the wood. The door frame shook once. Just once, like the thing pressed its weight against it, deciding whether it could push through. And then it whispered my name again. Only this time it sounded more human. More familiar. Almost like my own voice. Tell me, before I continue, what would you do if something outside your house called your name, in your own voice, after midnight, in a town where everyone knows better than to answer? Because I did something I should have never done. And that's when everything went wrong. Before that night, before the knocking, before the whispering, before everything spiraled out of control, I lived what most people would probably call a peaceful life. My name is Evan Miller, 27 years old, born and raised in a tiny place called Ridley Grove. Population 612. A quiet, tucked-away town in northern Pennsylvania where the loudest thing you usually heard after dusk was the wind slipping through the pine trees. I moved back after my mother passed away, inheriting her small one-story house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a cozy living room, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen. But it was warm, familiar, and filled with the kind of silence you only get in rural places like this. During the day, I worked remotely as a graphic designer, spending most of my time behind a desk. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch, watching the sun drop behind the treeline while cicadas hummed lazily. It was a slow life, but it was mine. On this particular night, the night everything changed, it was 12:18 a.m., and I was wide awake for no real reason at all. I'd fallen asleep earlier on the couch, a half-finished cup of cocoa still sitting on the coffee table. And when I woke up, I couldn't shake this restless feeling. Not fear. Not anxiety. Just a sort of unsettled energy, like my mind wasn't tired even if my body was. I remember thinking it was strange how still the house felt. No humming of the refrigerator. No wind outside. Even the usual cracks and pops of old wood settling seemed absent. For a moment it was like the whole world had paused. I got up, stretched, and started cleaning the kitchen out of habit. I washed the mug, wiped the counters, and glanced out the window every now and then. The backyard was pitch black. No streetlights, no porch light, nothing except the faint outline of the forest. I never liked how close the woods came to the house. Only about 30 yards separated my back door from the first row of trees, and at night, those trees looked like a wall, tall, dark, and impenetrable. But nothing ever happened back there. Nothing ever changed. That was part of the charm of living in a tiny town. Everything stayed exactly the same. Earlier that day, I'd stopped by the local diner. Old Mrs. Harrow, the owner, asked the same question she asked every time. "How's the house treating you, Evan?" I answered the same way I always did. As quiet as ever. People in Ridley Grove loved quiet. They valued it. Protected it. Even the kids didn't make noise after dark. That always seemed strange to me growing up, but when you live somewhere your entire life, certain things stop feeling unusual. They just become normal. That night, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through messages on my phone. A couple of friends from college were trying to get me to visit the city for the weekend, but I brushed it off. I liked my space. The stillness. The predictability. There was something comforting about knowing exactly what each night would be like. Calm. Silent. Still. I remember leaning back in my chair and closing my eyes, taking a deep breath of the cool, crisp air drifting in from the slightly open window. The smell of pine. The faint sweetness of damp earth. It was peaceful. Perfectly peaceful. A kind of quiet that made you think nothing bad could ever happen here. A kind of quiet that convinced you the world outside your walls was harmless. If I had known what was coming, what would knock on my door less than 30 minutes later, I would have packed a bag and left Ridley Grove that very night. But I didn't know. I just sat there thinking I was safe. Because in my town nothing ever happened. Or at least that's what I believed. It began with something so small, so ordinary, that I almost didn't register it at first. A sound. Just a faint, almost delicate click. Like a pebble tapping against glass. I paused halfway through scrolling my phone. For a moment, I wasn't even sure I'd heard anything. Old houses make noises. Pipes shift. Wood bends. The wind can throw something against a window. But then it happened again. Click. A little sharper this time. Like something flicked the window from the outside. I lowered my phone and turned my head toward the backyard window. The glass looked the same dark, reflecting the kitchen light back at me like a mirror. Nothing moved behind it. No shadows. No branches. I waited. Nothing. Still, a thin line of unease slid into my chest. Not fear, just the kind of tight feeling you get when you suddenly become aware of your surroundings in a way you weren't before. I exhaled slowly. "It's nothing," I whispered. But then the house changed. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. A shift in the air. A drop in temperature. Enough that I rubbed my arms without thinking. The warm kitchen felt suddenly colder. As if someone had cracked a window I didn't remember opening. I checked. All windows were shut except the one above the sink. Open only an inch, the same way I'd left it. Still the cold felt wrong. Too sudden. Too heavy. I walked to the window and slid it shut. The latch clicked softly, and for a moment that made me feel better. Until I turned around. The entire house felt still. Not the peaceful kind of stillness from earlier. This felt alert. Like the silence right before something moves. I tried to shake it off and return to the table, forcing myself to scroll again to act normal. But my eyes kept drifting to the dark backyard. It was like something out there wanted me to look. Wanted my attention. Another soft sound broke the silence. This time it wasn't a click. It was a shuffle. A slow dragging shuffle. In the leaves. Right outside the window. I sat completely still. Every muscle in my body tense, listening. The sound came again, slow, scratchy movement. Like something stepping through dry grass. I swallowed hard. Wildlife, I told myself. A deer maybe. Raccoon. Something harmless. But wildlife doesn't move like that. Not slow. Not deliberate. Not as if it's trying to stay just out of sight. I leaned slightly forward in my chair, holding my breath. The shuffling stopped. Then the feeling hit me, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. It washed over me like cold water. My shoulders tightened, and the fine hairs along the back of my neck lifted. I couldn't explain it, but something in the darkness was aware of me. And it wasn't moving anymore. It was waiting. I stood reluctantly and approached the window with careful steps. My heartbeat thudded softly in my ears. I reached the glass and looked out, but all I saw was the reflection of my own face, and behind it, a darkness so dense it might as well have been a wall. I didn't realize how hard I was gripping the counter until I felt my fingernails biting into my palm. "Stop," I muttered to myself. "It's nothing." I turned away, grabbed a glass of water and forced myself to sit back down. But even then I couldn't shake the sense that something was just beyond the house, listening, watching, waiting. When the fridge suddenly clicked on behind me with a mechanical hum, I nearly jumped out of my skin. My heartbeat thudded painfully against my ribs, and I let out a shaky breath. "Get it together, Evan." Another sound came. Soft. Impossible to mistake. From the back door this time. A tap. Just one. Then silence. I froze, staring at the dark hallway that led to the door. One tap wasn't enough to call it danger. Not enough to call it anything. But it was enough, more than enough, to tell me something was very, very wrong. And for the first time that night I felt scared. Truly scared. Without knowing why. Or of what. Story 1. Small town horror. The tap at the back door shouldn't have frozen me the way it did. Houses make noise. Wood contracts. Temperature changes. All the rational explanations lined up neatly in my head. But none of them mattered. Because I knew that sound. Everyone in Ridley Grove knew it. One tap. A warning. A first request. My breath stalled somewhere in my throat as I turned toward the hallway. The air felt heavier, like something had settled over the house, pressing down on it from all sides. The warmth was gone. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt alive. Listening. Waiting. Tap. A second one. Soft. Too soft. I took a single step forward, and it felt like trying to move through water. My legs were stiff, my chest tight. It was the kind of fear that doesn't need explanation. Your body simply knows something is wrong before your mind catches up. "Please, not tonight," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was pleading with. I reached the end of the hallway but didn't go closer. I didn't have to. From there I could see the outline of the back door. A pale rectangle at the end of the dark corridor. And then the door handle moved. Not violently. Not like someone trying to break in. Turned slowly. Curiously. As if whoever or whatever was outside had never used a door before and was learning through trial and error. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My hands trembled so badly I had to grip the wall to steady myself. The handle paused mid-turn. Silence. Then a voice. At first, it sounded like someone trying to whisper through a mouthful of static. "Evan." My name. My blood went cold. It wasn't a human voice. Not exactly. It had the shape of a human voice, the outline of familiarity. But something inside it twisted unnaturally, like broken vocal cords forcing themselves to work. I stepped back. Then another step. "No," I breathed. "No, no." The handle released with a metallic click. Then 3 taps. Slow. Deliberate. Exactly like before. Only this time each one rattled the frame. Something big was outside. The air in the house thickened, pressing against my lungs. I grabbed my phone instinctively, but the screen flickered and turned black the moment I touched it. Dead. No service. No battery. No signal. Like the house itself had been pulled out of the world. My vision blurred around the edges as panic clawed its way up my throat. I stumbled backward toward the living room, toward light, anything familiar. Then the sound came again. But it wasn't tapping. It was breathing. Slow. Deep. Right outside the door. A low rumbling inhale followed by a wet, rattling exhale. Like something enormous was leaning its face against the wood. I covered my mouth to keep from gasping. I didn't want it to know I was there. But then the worst thing possible happened. The creature spoke again. Only this time it didn't say my name. It mimicked something. It copied the exact sound of me breathing. Perfectly. My breath froze. My stomach twisted. The room spun for a moment. That's when I realized the rumors, the warnings, the unspoken rules of Ridley Grove weren't superstitions. They weren't stories. They were survival tactics. And I had broken the most important one. Never be awake after midnight. Never make noise. Never let it know you're there. But it knew now. It knew exactly where I was. The breathing outside the door grew louder. Closer, heavier. until I could feel the vibrations in the floor. Then, something scraped slowly across the wood. A long dragging sound. A claw. Testing the door. Tracing the outline of the frame, as if memorizing it. And that's when I understood the truth. This thing wasn't trying to get inside. It was trying to learn how. And it wasn't going to leave until it did. I didn't stop to scream. Didn't think. Didn't breathe. The moment I saw its body uncoil from behind the trees, those long jointless limbs unfolding like wet rope, I bolted. I don't even remember deciding to run. My legs just tore forward through the darkness, smashing through branches, slipping in mud, lungs burning instantly. Behind me, something followed. Not running. Not walking. Slithering. Its movement didn't sound like footsteps. It was like something dragging itself, scraping its weight across the forest floor with unnatural speed. Every few seconds, a sharp crack of wood snapping echoed far too close. I didn't dare look back. The trees thinned just enough for moonlight to break through, but it didn't help. If anything, it made everything worse, because the moment I hit the clearing, I heard it suck in a long wet breath behind me, like it was tasting the air I left behind. My chest seized. I sprinted harder, stumbling up the slope toward my cabin. My foot caught on a root I slammed into the ground, and for a split second the world spun. I felt the earth vibrate, soft at first, then heavier like something big lowering itself closer. I pushed myself up too slow. Branches behind me abruptly bent, groaned, then snapped apart as something massive forced its way through. I didn't wait to see it. I launched forward, half running, half crawling, tearing my hands on the rocks as I scrambled up the hill. The cabin came into sight. The lights were still on. The door was still open, just a few inches but open enough to look like salvation. I forced my legs to sprint again. Behind me that sucking breath grew louder, closer, followed by a sudden quick scraping sound, like metal dragging across stone. My mind didn't understand it, but my body recognized danger instantly. I dove for the porch. The boards rattled under me as I slammed onto them. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I didn't care. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the doorknob and froze. There was a shadow by my feet. Not mine. Long, thin. Reaching. I threw my weight against the door and shoved myself inside, slamming it behind me hard enough to make the frame shake. My hands fumbled for the lock, my fingers slipping, shaking, missing the latch entirely. Then something hit the door. Not a bang. Not a slam. A tap. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Like it was knocking. I finally snapped the lock into place and stumbled backward so fast I fell onto the floor. My vision blurred with tears and adrenaline. Every instinct told me to hide, to get away from the door, to make myself small. I crawled into the kitchen and pressed my back against the counter, heart hammering so hard it hurt. I squeezed my eyes shut, sucking in quick, shallow breaths. Silence. For a moment, just one moment, I thought it might be gone. Then the scratching started. Soft. Gentle. Almost curious. It moved along the doorframe, slow enough to suggest it wasn't trying to break in. It was mapping the shape of the house. The sound traveled along the wall, up the siding, then across the windows. I could hear it brushing against the glass, something thin tapping lightly, almost like a fingertip. I crawled deeper into the house, toward the bedroom. I didn't dare stand. Every movement I made felt deafening. Every sound from outside felt amplified. Then a window creaked. Not opening, flexing, like something was pressing against it. I clamped my hand over my mouth as my breathing went ragged. The window thinned as it bowed inward. The glass moaned. A small crack formed near the bottom corner. No, the crack spread. I grabbed the dresser and dragged it toward the window, shoving it in front just as the crack forked upward with a sharp snap. The glass held barely. From the other side came a sound I can never unhear. A slow, drawn-out exhale. Right against the glass. I backed away, shaking, gripping my phone like it was a weapon. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have hope. I just stood there waiting for the next sound, the next break, the next. Everything stopped. Silence. Not peace. Not safety. The kind of silence predators make when they're deciding their next move. I stayed frozen. 20 seconds. 30. A minute. Then far off, deep in the woods, a single branch snapped. Whatever it was, it had moved. Or worse, it had gone somewhere else. For a long time I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the front door, every muscle in my body shaking so violently I could feel my teeth chattering. The knock didn't come again. No scraping. No breathing. Just silence, the kind that feels too heavy, too intentional, like someone holding their breath on the other side. Minutes passed. 10. 20. Still nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it might have been a branch or an animal or something my mind made up. I needed something, anything, to believe that thing wasn't still outside. I forced myself to check the windows. Slowly. Carefully. Every curtain was drawn tight, every door locked. The house looked normal. Safe. Almost peaceful. The warm glow from the kitchen light made the nightmare in the woods feel like something distant, drifting away, somehow exaggerated by panic. For a moment, I almost believed I was safe. But every time my foot creaked on the floorboards, I caught myself freezing, heart thudding, waiting for some reaction from outside. Nothing came. Not a single whisper of movement. Finally, I grabbed my phone and dialed the sheriff's office. My voice trembled as I told them a large animal had chased me through the woods and was now somewhere near my house. I didn't dare describe what it really looked like. They sent a deputy to drive by. I stayed pressed against the living room wall, peeking through the smallest gap in the curtains as the patrol car's headlights swept across my property. The deputy didn't get out, didn't walk around, didn't inspect the woods. Just slowed down, paused in front of my house, then drove on. And that was it. No knock on my door. No reassurance. Just gone. I kept listening long after the engine faded away. Still nothing. Around 3 a.m., I finally worked up the courage to step onto the porch. The boards didn't creak the way they normally did. Maybe I was imagining it. My senses were scrambled, but something felt different. Off. Like the air itself was heavier. I crouched down slowly and scanned the wooden planks with my phone flashlight. No footprints. No claw marks. No scratches. Not even dust disturbed. As if nothing had touched the porch at all. But I heard it. I know I heard it. The 3 taps. Soft, deliberate. Rhythmic. I walked the length of the porch twice, shining the light on every corner. Every railing, even the flower pots. Nothing. No sign of anything living or dead had been there. For a brief moment, I wondered if the creature had never come to the porch at all. Maybe it wasn't the creature knocking. Maybe it was something else. The thought sank into me like ice. I went back inside and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw its long body, its twisted limbs, the way it snapped toward me when the headlights hit it, like light exposed something it didn't want me to see. And then something even stranger happened the next morning. When I stepped outside at dawn, the entire area around my house looked wrong. Disturbed. Not visibly but atmospherically, like the world had shifted a few inches to the left. Birds weren't chirping. Wind wasn't blowing. Even the trees seemed to lean a little differently. And there, on the edge of the woods, my breath caught in my throat. Hanging from a low branch was something small, something unmistakably mine, my house key. The spare one I kept hidden under a loose brick on the porch. It dangled from the branch by a strip of torn fabric. Fabric the exact color of the jacket I had been wearing when the creature almost grabbed me. And on the ground beneath it were 3 small indentations in the soil. Not footprints. Not paw prints. Just 3 perfect, evenly spaced impressions, like someone had pressed a finger into the earth 3 times slowly. Like a knock. I don't know what left my key there. I don't know what followed me out of those woods. And I don't know why, after last night, my house suddenly feels like it isn't completely mine anymore. All I know is this: at some point sometime soon, I'm going to have to open the door again.